In this section, we will talk about the heart valves prevent backflow of blood during systole. So let's get started. First are the atrioventricular valves. The AV valves means the tricuspid and mitral valves prevent backflow of blood from the ventricles to the atria during systole, and the semilunar valves means the aortic and pulmonary artery valves prevent backflow from the aorta and pulmonary arteries into the ventricles during diastole. These valves for the left ventricle close and open passively. That is, they close when a backward pressure gradient pushes blood backward, and they open when a forward pressure gradient forces blood in the forward direction. For anatomical reasons, the thin AV valves require almost no backflow to cause closure, whereas the much heavier semilunar valves require rather rapid backflow for a few milliseconds. Now, let's discuss the function of the papillary muscles. Papillary muscles that attach to the veins of the AV valves by the chorda tendineae. The papillary muscles contract when the ventricular walls contract. But contrary to what might be expected, they do not help the valves to close. Instead, they pull the veins of the valves inward toward the ventricles to prevent their bulging too far backward toward the atria during ventricular contraction. If a chorda tendineae becomes ruptured, or if one of the papillary muscles becomes paralyzed due to low blood flow from a myocardial infarction, the valve bulges far backward during ventricular contraction, sometimes so far that it leaks severely. Now let's discuss the aortic and pulmonary artery valves. The aortic and pulmonary artery semilunar valves function quite differently from the AV valves. First, the high pressures in the arteries at the end of systole cause the semilunar valves to snap closed, in contrast to the much softer closure of the AV valves. Second, because of smaller openings, the velocity of blood ejection through the aortic and pulmonary valves is much greater than that through the much larger AV valves. Also, because of the rapid closure and rapid ejection, the edges of the aortic and pulmonary valves are subjected to much greater mechanical abrasion than the AV valves. Finally, the AV valves are supported by the chorda tendineae, which is not true for the semilunar valves. It is obvious from the anatomy of the aortic and pulmonary valves that they must be constructed with an especially strong, yet very pliable fibrous tissue to withstand the extra physical stresses. Moving forwards to understand the relationship of a heart sounds to heart pumping. When listening to the heart with a stethoscope, one does not hear the opening of the valves because this is a relatively slow process that normally makes no noise. However, when the valves close, the veins of the valves and the surrounding fluids vibrate under the influence of sudden pressure changes, giving off sound that travels in all directions through the chest. When the ventricles contract, one first hears a sound caused by closure of the AV valves. The vibration pitch is low and relatively long-lasting, and is known as the first heart sound, or S1. When the aortic and pulmonary valves close at the end of systole, one hears a rapid snap, because these valves close rapidly, and the surroundings vibrate for a short period. This sound is called the second heart sound, or S2. Now, let's discuss the work output of a heart. The stroke work output of a heart is the amount of energy that the heart converts to work during each heartbeat while pumping blood into the arteries. Work output of a heart is in two forms. First, the major proportion is used to move the blood from the low-pressure veins to the high-pressure arteries. This is called volume pressure work or external work. Second, a minor proportion of the energy is used to accelerate the blood to its velocity of ejection through the aortic and pulmonary valves, which is the kinetic energy of blood flow component of the work output. Right ventricular external work output is normally about 1/6 the work output of the left ventricle, because of the six-fold difference in systolic pressures pumped by the two ventricles. The additional work output of each ventricle required to create kinetic energy of blood flow is proportional to the mass of blood ejected times the square of velocity of ejection. Ordinarily, the work output of the left ventricle required to create kinetic energy of blood flow is only about 1% of the total work output of the ventricle, and therefore is ignored in the calculation of the total stroke work output. In certain abnormal conditions, however, such as aortic stenosis, in which blood flows with great velocity through the stenosed valve, more than 50% of the total work output may be required to create kinetic energy of blood flow. This was all about this section. In our next section, we will talk about the graphic analysis of ventricular pumping.
Explore our extensive library of over 1,800 video lectures to learn about a wide range of topics. Only on sqadia.com.